My stepson mocked me in front of his girlfriends, calling me not his real dad. I withdrew my support, transferred the lease and contracts into their mother's name, and walked away from the rest. He looked at his mother first. He said it like a joke. Not angry, not careless, practiced, cold. He's not my dad, he just lives here for now. The words fell into the air like nails. Sharp, final. The laughter that followed wasn't real. It was the kind of laughter that masks discomfort, that tries to fill the silence left by cruelty. But it didn't fill it. It echoed instead, stretched and turned thin. I was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a plate still warm from the sink. The smell of dish soap mixed with the faint musk of teenage sweat drifting from the living room where Zach sat with his friends. Their sneakers were scattered across the floor like a declaration of carelessness. I had just finished cooking for them, burgers, fries, the kind of food that makes the whole house smell alive for a while. Aaron had gone upstairs to take a shower, trusting me to handle the kids. And I did. I handled everything. The cooking, the bills, the yard, the slow erosion of my place in this house. When Zach said it, when those 7 words hit the air, something inside me just stopped. My chest tightened, my fingers went numb, and I heard the faint crack of ceramic. The plate slipping from my hands, landing hard on the counter. It didn't break, but something else did. I didn't speak. Didn't make a sound. I just stood there, a man half swallowed by the doorway, watching a group of teenagers laugh at my expense in a house I'd built from overtime hours and broken promises. Zach looked right at me afterward. Not with regret, not even defiance. Just blank amusement, as if I were a background character in his story. That was the moment everything collapsed in silence. The respect I thought I'd earned. The care I'd fought for. The illusion of family I'd been trying to hold together. My name's Michael, 45 years old, born and raised in Colorado. I've been an electrician since I was 19. Crawling through attics, balancing on ladders, patching walls no one will ever look at. People think the work is simple, but it's not. You spend your life threading light through darkness, connecting circuits that no one appreciates until they stop working. I met Erin 4 years ago at a charity event for the local high school. She was volunteering, laughing with that soft, exhausted smile women wear when they've been holding things together for too long. I was there to fix a broken light in the gym. Not exactly romantic, but fate doesn't always need to be. She was divorced, raising a son alone. Zach, 17 then, tall, lean, with that restless energy boys carry when they don't know who they are yet. He didn't talk much, just nodded when introduced. His hoodie stayed up, his eyes down. He wasn't rude. Not at first, just closed off like the world had already betrayed him and he wasn't giving it another chance. Aaron told me his father, Dan, still came around sometimes. I could see the hesitation in her voice when she said it. He's inconsistent, she told me once. That was her word for it. Inconsistent. What she meant was unreliable. Charming when present, absent when needed. A ghost with a pulse. When Dan appeared, it was always the same pattern. He'd roll up in some leased truck, engine roaring like he wanted the whole neighborhood to know he was still around. He'd step out in sunglasses, all grin and swagger, and Zach's eyes would light up like he'd been waiting months for that very sound. For a weekend, I'd become invisible. Dan would take Zach out, buy him something shiny, sneakers, a new phone, maybe tickets to a game. He'd make a speech about living free, about not letting anyone control your path. Then he'd vanish again. No child support, no follow-up calls, no help when things broke. Just the aftertaste of gasoline and ego. And me? I was the one who stayed behind. The one who fixed the leaky faucet at midnight. The one who picked up Zach from detention when he mouthed off to a teacher. The one who sat up with Erin when the bills didn't add up and she cried into her hands, whispering that she hated needing anyone. I wasn't trying to replace Dan. I just wanted peace. A steady rhythm. A home that didn't feel like a waiting room for someone else's return. Erin and I moved in together a year after meeting. I sold my small apartment and put the down payment on a 2-story house outside Denver. Nothing fancy, just solid. A garage big enough for my tools, a yard that could fit a grill and maybe a basketball hoop. Erin called it a fresh start. Zach didn't say anything, but the look on his face said enough. That mix of suspicion and quiet resentment only teenagers can perfect. I told myself he'd come around. Kids test boundaries. That's what they do. So I gave him space. I helped him fix his old car, taught him how to change a tire, how to read a breaker box. When he started applying for colleges, I spent nights helping him with essays, paying for test prep courses, covering fees his father never asked about. Every small victory felt like proof that effort mattered, that maybe one day he'd see me not as the man who replaced his dad, but as the man who showed up when his dad didn't. But every time Dan returned, all that progress vanished overnight. Zach would come back from those weekends with a new smirk, a sharper tone. He'd mimic his father's laugh, his walk, his way of cutting people off mid-sentence. Suddenly, my advice meant nothing. My rules were control. My care was interference. And Erin, God bless her, she tried to keep the peace. But silence is its own kind of betrayal. When Zach rolled his eyes at me, when he mocked my work, when he said things like, "My real dad doesn't treat me like a kid," she'd sigh and say, "He's just being a teenager, Michael. Don't take it personally." But everything in that house was personal. Every sigh, every shrug, every time she didn't defend me. I used to tell myself that love is patient, that respect takes time. But time only matters when both sides are waiting for the same thing. I was waiting for family. They were waiting for me to give up. And then came that night. Zach had friends over, 3 boys and 2 girls. The kind of gathering that's supposed to feel harmless, like a normal Friday. Erin was upstairs, humming along to some song in the shower. I was cleaning up, half listening to their chatter from the kitchen. Then I heard it. The laughter. My name. And that sentence that changed everything. "He's not my dad, he just lives here for now." It wasn't said with venom. It was said with calculation, like something rehearsed. The kind of cruelty that comes not from impulse but from certainty. The girls laughed because that's what you do when someone mocks authority. It makes you feel in on the joke. But I wasn't in on anything. I was the punchline. I remember the light from the TV flickering over Zach's face as he said it. For a second, I saw his father there. Not just in the shape of his jaw or the curl of his lip, but in that casual indifference, that cruel charisma. It was Dan speaking through him, the ghost alive again. And maybe that's what broke me most. Realizing that no matter what I built, no matter how many years I gave, Dan would always own the part of him that mattered most. The part that decides who's family and who's not. After they left, the house was quiet. Erin came downstairs, towel around her hair, asking if the kids had eaten. I nodded. She didn't notice my hands still trembling, didn't ask why I was staring at the sink like it had swallowed something important. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her listening to her breathing, steady and calm, while my mind replayed Zach's words in a loop. "He just lives here for now. For now." That was the part that cut deepest. Because he was right. Nothing in that house belonged to me. Not the laughter, not the loyalty, not even the silence. I was a guest in a life I paid for. I thought about my father then. A hard man, quiet, distant. He used to say, "A house isn't a home unless someone misses you when you're gone." I hadn't understood it until that night. Because I realized, if I left tomorrow, the bills would pile up, the lights would flicker, but emotionally, the air wouldn't move. I'd be gone, and the house would breathe easier. That's when I knew something inside me had shifted. Not broken, not yet, but cracked deep enough that the next tremor would finish the job. And deep down, I think Zach knew it too. At first, I didn't try to replace his father. I only wanted peace. I thought if I stayed consistent, if I worked hard, paid the bills, fixed what broke, time would do the rest. Time, I believed, could soften anything. Even resentment. Erin and I built a small life outside Denver. A beige 2-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac, where the mountains looked close enough to touch but never quite reachable. I poured myself into it. I rewired the basement, built shelves in the garage, planted a row of aspens out front so that in autumn, the yard would burn gold. It wasn't much, but it was ours. At least, that's what I told myself. Zach never said thank you. He didn't have to. His silence was its own language, sharp, fluent, fluent in dismissal. He'd pass me in the hallway without meeting my eyes, earbuds in, world sealed shut. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers build walls. I'd built plenty myself at his age. The difference was no one had tried to climb mine. Still, I tried. I helped him fill out college applications, stayed up late proofreading essays he didn't care about. I fixed his old Honda Civic, paid for the insurance, and when the acceptance letter came, I was the one who hugged him first. He didn't hug back. Not really, just let it happen. Aaron cried. I took the picture. It's still framed in the hallway, him looking off to the side, me with my arm half raised, as if reaching for something already pulling away. Then his father came back. Dan. The shadow that never really left. He rolled up in a new truck that wasn't his, music blaring, the kind of man who never learned to lower his voice or apologize. He wore a shirt too tight for his arms and a grin too big for his failures. Zach ran outside before I could say a word. I watched from the window as Dan lifted his son into a rough embrace, all laughter and noise, like the past had never existed. Erin stood beside me, her face unreadable, some mix of nostalgia, guilt, and habit. She said, "He means well, but meaning well and doing right are two different trades." That weekend, the house filled with Dan's voice. He told stories that didn't end, laughed too loudly at his own jokes, called me buddy, like we were equals. He stayed 2 days, left behind empty beer cans and an echo of chaos. Before he drove away, he slapped Zach on the shoulder and said, "Life's about freedom, kid. Don't let anyone cage you." When the sound of his engine faded, Zach's silence turned cold. I asked him to take the trash out that evening. He didn't move. When I repeated it, he said, without looking up, "You're not my boss." Erin looked up from her phone, sighed, and said, "He's tired. Let it go. Let it go." That became her prayer. Every slight, every small disrespect, smoothed over with those words. Let it go. But letting things go is how you lose a home, piece by piece. Weeks passed like that. Zach spent more time at friends' houses, came home later, left his shoes wherever they landed. When I tried to talk about his grades, he smirked, the same smirk his father wore like armor. "You care too much," he said. "It's pathetic." Erin's silence after that sentence was worse than the insult itself. She didn't correct him, didn't even look up. I realized then that silence has two edges, one that protects peace, and one that *LLS respect. Hers was the latter. I began to move quieter around the house. Not out of fear, out of exhaustion. I stopped offering advice. I stopped waiting for gratitude. I just worked, paid bills, mowed the lawn, existed. Then one night the music came, loud enough to rattle the glass, to shake dust from the frames on the wall. It was a Thursday, a work night. I walked into the living room and found Zach on the couch, legs sprawled, eyes half closed, lost in his own noise. "Turn it down," I said, calm, not angry, just tired. He didn't move. I stepped closer. I said, "Turn it down. You've got exams tomorrow." He looked up at me, eyes glassy with defiance. Then, in that half-smile I'd come to know too well, he said, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" The music thudded behind his words, slow, deliberate, mocking. His friends, 2 of them this time, burst into laughter. The kind of laughter that comes when someone's watching a man's dignity get stripped bare. I could have shouted. I could have thrown the remote through the TV. But I didn't. I just stood there. I looked at Erin. She was in the kitchen, frozen mid-step, holding a dish towel. And I saw it in her face, the hesitation, the calculation. She wasn't going to back me up. That was the moment. Not the insult itself, I could take an insult. It was the glance he gave her after he said it. The unspoken question in his eyes. "Are you going to stop me?" And the answer, silent but clear, "No." He turned the volume up. Something inside me went still. Not anger, just stillness. The kind that comes before a storm. I walked out of the room, up the stairs, into our bedroom, closed the door softly, sat down on the edge of the bed and listened to the bass pounding through the floorboards. That's when I realized I had been fighting for a place that didn't exist. For years, I'd mistaken effort for belonging. I thought paying for things, cars, tuition, groceries, would eventually earn me a seat at the table. But you can't buy your way into someone's respect. You can't purchase love with labor. Dan had done nothing, yet still owned the story. I had done everything, yet remained the stranger. In the darkness of that room, I understood something I'd been denying. I wasn't a stepfather. I was a stand-in, a placeholder between a woman and the ghost of the man she still made excuses for. The next morning, Erin acted like nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, kissed my cheek, said, "You okay?" As if I'd just had a bad dream. Zach didn't come down for breakfast. His music thumped faintly through the ceiling. I nodded, but inside, I was already gone. That day at work, I climbed through an attic full of fiberglass and old wiring. The air was thick, itchy, hot enough to burn the skin. Sweat dripped into my eyes, and as I lay there reconnecting a dead circuit, I thought about my life below ground, that house, that family, and realized it was just another broken wire I kept trying to fix. You can only patch something so many times before the current refuses to flow. When I came home that evening, the sun was setting. The yard glowed copper. Zach's car was parked half on the grass, door hanging open, fast food wrappers spilling onto the driveway. I stood there for a long time, watching the light fade across the mountains. That's when the truth finally hit me. Not like a blow, but like gravity. It wasn't Zach's disrespect that hurt the most. It was Erin's silence. Because silence is a choice, and she'd been making it for years. From that moment on, something in me began to fade. The house still stood, but I didn't live in it anymore. Not really. I was a shadow moving through rooms I'd built with my hands. Unseen, unnecessary. I thought about leaving. Some nights I packed my tools into the truck, drove to the end of the street, and just sat there staring at the empty road ahead. I imagined how quiet it would be, how peaceful, to wake up somewhere no one expected anything from me. But I always turned back. Habit, maybe, or cowardice, or love. They're all the same thing after a while. When I returned, the windows were lit, the house alive with the hum of laughter and television. I'd stand outside for a moment, hand on the doorknob, listening, trying to decide if I was ready to step back into the story where I no longer belonged. Every time I did, I told myself, one more try, just one more. But deep down, I already knew how it would end. I didn't yell, didn't break anything, didn't threaten or beg or make speeches. The next morning, I simply woke before everyone else, poured a cup of coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. The house was still half asleep. The faint hum of the fridge, the creak of pipes, the slow rhythm of another day that already felt like the last one. Zach's shoes were still in the hallway, mud dried along the soles. His jacket hung over the chair I had built from pine the year we moved in. Everything he touched felt borrowed, temporary, but never from his point of view, only from mine. The laptop glowed faintly in the early light. I opened it, signed into every account that tied me to them. The car payments, the insurance, the college tuition, the utilities. Line after line of responsibility stretched before me like a chain. My name was everywhere. I started deleting it. Not in anger. In silence. Precision. Click by click, I unwound myself from their world. The car transferred to Erin's name. The insurance removed my signature. Zach's college account, automatic payments canceled. His gas card frozen. By the time the sun rose, my name was gone from nearly everything that had once made their life comfortable. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was something colder, a recalibration of fairness. For years I had carried their world like a beam on my shoulders, waiting for someone to notice the weight. No one did. Now they would notice the absence. I sat back in the chair, sipped my coffee, and watched light crawl across the table. The house seemed unaware of what had just happened. Erin's footsteps sounded upstairs. Water ran in the bathroom. A door opened. Ordinary noises. But I knew the balance had shifted. That afternoon, the first tremor hit. Erin's voice called from the living room. Sharp. Confused. "Michael." Did you change the insurance info? They said the payment didn't go through. I looked up from the paper I was pretending to read. I moved everything into your name. Thought it made sense. She blinked, uncomprehending. You should have told me. Maybe, I said, and turned another page. The second tremor came the next day. A call from Zach's college. He answered it on speaker by accident. His voice rising in panic, the financial office explaining that tuition had bounced. I listened from the kitchen, silent. Aaron hovered behind him, face tight. What do you mean it bounced? Michael, he handles that. The woman on the line said, we no longer have authorization from that account. Zach's voice cracked. That's impossible. I turned the page again. It took 3 days for the full storm to reach them. 3 days for every safety net I'd built to collapse in sequence. Erin's phone buzzed constantly, banks, utilities, policies needing renewal. She ran around the house with stacks of paper, half-dressed, hair pulled back, muttering numbers and dates like prayers. Zach grew quiet. The music stopped. The friends stopped coming. The laughter that used to fill the house, forced, cruel, was gone. The air was heavy with a silence I had been waiting for years to hear. That evening, I came home from work, tired, hands raw from a day spent wiring an office complex that would never thank me. Aaron was at the table, surrounded by bills. Zach was pacing. He stopped when I entered, jaw clenched. Why aren't you doing anything? He demanded. You're just sitting there while everything falls apart. I set down my lunchbox. Because I'm nobody to you, remember? The sentence landed between us like a brick. Aaron looked up sharply. Zach froze, the realization dawning. His own words coming back for him, sharper now, without laughter. He tried again, voice smaller. That's not what It's exactly what you said. I cut in. I just listened this time. Aaron's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Always nothing. I went upstairs, left them in the quiet, and for the first time the silence didn't follow me. I stayed with them. Over the next week I became a ghost. I came home late, left early. They whispered when I entered rooms. I saw them at the kitchen table, papers spread like evidence of a crime no one wanted to name. Zach made calls to his father, I assumed. I overheard fragments. He won't help. I can't. Please, just this once. The calls always ended the same way, silence. Then the dull thud of something thrown against a wall. One night, I heard Aaron crying in the bathroom. I didn't go in. Some lessons come too late to soften. Days turned into a rhythm of unraveling. The car insurance lapsed. The internet went out. The electricity company called asking for a new payment source. Each absence revealed the truth. Every comfort they'd taken for granted had been held together by my quiet labor. Without it, the house felt smaller, colder. Zach started coming home earlier, no longer bringing friends. His eyes were different now, not angry, just lost. I caught him once standing by the sink, staring out the window at the yard I used to mow every Sunday. He looked older in that moment, like someone who'd finally noticed how fragile life is when you've never held it yourself. He caught me watching and said, I didn't mean what I said. I nodded. Maybe not, but you said it. He swallowed hard, looked away. I don't know. I thought it didn't matter. Everything matters, I said, especially the things we think don't. He left the room quietly. Erin stopped trying to fix things after that. She moved slower, spoke softer, as if afraid of the echo her own voice might cause. I knew she blamed me, but blame changes nothing. She had chosen silence too many times. Now she was living inside it. One evening, the house finally broke. I came home to find Zach in the driveway, car hood open, engine dead. He looked at me helplessly. Battery's gone, he muttered. Won't even crank. I nodded. Insurance is expired. Roadside won't cover it. His shoulders sagged. So that's it. That's it. He stood there, fists tightening, breathing hard. Then, almost in a whisper, I didn't think it all worked like that. I met his eyes. It all works exactly like that. That night at dinner, no one spoke. The clatter of forks was the only sound. Erin pushed her food around the plate. Zach sat opposite me, eyes lowered. The quiet stretched until it became unbearable. Then softly, he said, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Words are cheap until they cost something. When the plates were cleared, I stood and looked at them both. The woman I had loved, the boy I had raised without permission. "I've been fixing things my whole life," I said. "But some things shouldn't be fixed." Erin looked at me, fear in her eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done holding everything together." Then I walked outside. The air was cold, clean, honest. The mountains were dark against the horizon, steady and indifferent. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the silence, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, the house creaked, a structure built on borrowed trust, shifting under its own weight. I realized then that dignity isn't something you demand. It's something you reclaim, one quiet decision at a time. And that's what I had done. First came the anger, then the silence. A week passed after I cut the last wire that held their lives to mine. Erin stopped talking to me, at least in ways that mattered. We exchanged the bare minimum: schedules, groceries, reminders. The rest of the house became a graveyard of unspoken things. Zach didn't shout again. He didn't try. He just moved quietly, like a man walking through the wreckage of something he finally understood was real. The nights were the worst. I could hear him pacing in his room, talking to someone on the phone in a hushed, desperate tone. Maybe his father, maybe no one. The world outside went on as if nothing had happened. Work stayed the same: wires, switches, the comfort of rules that obeyed logic. Electricity was honest. People weren't. Then, one evening, we sat at the table together for the first time since the collapse. No music, no phones, just the three of us pretending to eat. The light above the table flickered once, then steadied, almost like it was holding its breath. Zach's fork scraped the plate. His voice, when it came, was small. I didn't think it all worked like that. He didn't look up when he said it. Didn't need to. I knew what he meant, that a single sentence could unravel years of stability, that words could be debts you can't repay with regret. I didn't answer. I let the silence hang. Sometimes silence is the only language left. Erin sat across from me, her hands folded too neatly, her knuckles white. She looked at me once, then away. That, more than anything, told me where we stood. Zach tried again. I didn't mean what I said. I was just mad. I took a slow sip of water. "No one ever means it," I said. "Until they do." The sound of a clock ticked behind us, steady and cruel. Erin's eyes were glassy, full of things she'd never say. I finished eating, pushed back my chair, and stood. "Respect isn't something you get by accident, Zach. It's a job. You show up every day for it." He nodded once, barely moving. The kind of nod people give when they're not ready to agree but too tired to argue. Erin broke then. "Michael, please, enough." Her voice trembled. "He's just a boy." I looked at her. "He's almost a man. And if he keeps thinking words don't matter, he'll never be more than his father." The mention of Dan's name landed like a slap. She flinched, and I almost felt sorry. Almost. I went outside. The air was cold, clean, edged with pine and distance. I stood on the porch, looking out at the yard I'd built. The lights I'd strung years ago still hanging from the eaves, half burned out but refusing to die. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices, Erin's whisper, Zach's quiet reply. But I didn't turn around. Whatever conversation was happening in that kitchen, it wasn't for me. That's the strange thing about withdrawal. People notice it only when it's complete. As long as you're half present, they assume you'll always return. But once you stop showing up, once you truly step back, the air changes. They start to realize how much of their comfort depended on your silence. Days passed. The bills began coming in with new names on them. Erin's credit cards started to choke under the weight of expenses I'd carried without a word. The house, once steady, began to sag, a metaphor you could measure in numbers. Zach started washing dishes, not because I asked, but because he didn't know what else to do. I'd find him in the kitchen sometimes, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing plates like they were penance. He never said anything, Neither did I. That was our truce, labor instead of apology. One afternoon, I came home to find him outside, kneeling beside his car, hands black with grease. The hood was open, tools scattered. He was trying to change the oil, something I'd done for him a dozen times before. He looked up when he heard my boots on the gravel. "Won't come loose," he muttered. The plug stuck. I watched him for a moment. The wrench slipped, knuckles scraping metal. He hissed, wiped the blood on his jeans, tried again. Could have stepped in. Could have loosened it in 5 seconds. But I didn't. I just stood there and let him fight with it. Because that's how you learn. Not from being rescued, but from being left alone with your mistakes. After 10 minutes, he got it. The wrench clicked, the plug came free, and a small victory bloomed across his face. He looked at me then, not for approval, not for praise, just acknowledgement. And I gave it. A single nod. Quiet. Wordless. That night, something shifted. At dinner, he asked if I wanted another plate. Small gesture, but it carried more weight than any apology. Erin noticed. She looked between us, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in a long time, hope. But hope's a fragile thing. It doesn't erase what came before. Later, after they'd gone to bed, I sat outside again, a blanket over my shoulders, the sky a black sheet filled with cold stars. I thought about everything that had led us here, every choice, every silence, every swallowed insult. The strange how a family can decay without noise. There's no explosion, no final scream. Just a slow fading of color until all that's left are outlines. I wondered if I'd done the right thing. Cutting the payments, withdrawing, letting them fall. Maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I'd turned lesson into punishment. But then I remembered that night. The laughter. The words, "He just lives here for now." That sentence was the truth they'd built around me. All I'd done was stop pretending it wasn't. Still, guilt is a loyal companion. It waits at the edges, whispering. I thought about Zach's face when the car battery died, when he realized the world didn't fix itself. I thought about Erin's silence, the way it had hardened into survival. I wondered if I'd become the very thing I despised, another man who walked away. But the difference was I hadn't left. I was still here. I just stopped saving them. A few nights later, Zach knocked on my door. Late, maybe past midnight. His voice was low, uncertain. "Can I talk to you?" I nodded. He stood there, hands shoved in his hoodie, eyes red but dry. "I don't hate you," he said. "I just didn't know how to like you." I didn't answer. Some truths deserve silence more than reply. He continued, voice cracking. "Dad says things. You know? Stuff about you. About how you're controlling. How you don't get it." I guess I wanted to believe him. I breathed slowly. "And now," he shrugged. "Now I just think he's scared of you. Because you stay." That one hit harder than I expected. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who mocked me, but the young man who might finally be learning what staying costs. He stood there a while, waiting for something. Forgiveness, maybe. I didn't give it, but I didn't send him away either. He left on his own, shoulders heavier but head higher. When the door closed, I sat back down and stared at the floorboards. The house was quiet again, but not empty. There was a different kind of silence now. Not hostility, not fear, but something closer to understanding. It wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was the beginning of truth. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and watched the sun rise through the kitchen window. The light fell across the table, soft and indifferent. Erin came downstairs, eyes tired, hair pulled back. She hesitated before speaking. "Thank you," she said. "Just that. Nothing else." For what? I don't know. Maybe for staying. Maybe for leaving them the space to feel what loss really is. Outside, Zach's car started, rough at first, then steady. The sound was uneven, but it held. I took a sip of coffee and closed my eyes. Sometimes, the only way to reclaim your dignity is to stop holding on to people who already let go. And when you finally release them, you find out what remains. Not love. Not gratitude. Just the quiet, solid truth of yourself.